Ahla sahla fikum. Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we are featuring one of my favorites, baklava. Baklava is popular in the Middle East and as well as in my family. Keep watching this video and I'll show you how easy it is to put together. Let's get started. Let's start with the ingredients that you'll need. You'll need two 16-ounce of filo dough, and I usually find them in a specialty store. I've also found them in supermarkets in their freezer section. You want to get it with the sheets whole and not cut up. So you'll need two 16-ounce of filo dough. You'll need 2 cups of Crisco. You'll need walnuts, which is 32 ounces of walnuts, and these are whole walnuts, but we will finely chop them. You'll need a half a cup of the sugar for the actual baklava filling, and you'll need rose water, which is 2 tablespoons of it. Now, when you make the sugar syrup, you're gonna go with 4 cups of sugar, 2 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of the rose water again, and 2 tablespoons of the lemon juice. The utensils you'll need is a pastry brush, and you want to use a brush that has bristles and not the plastic, because when we melt the Crisco, we're going to want to brush with it, and the bristles brush is what picks up the butter. And you're also going to need a ruler. You don't have a ruler, it's not a big deal. It's to when we cut the baklava before we bake it, and I'll show you at the time. I want to go back to the Crisco. My mother's used, and many people that I've known has used Crisco to make baklava. I know that it is also made with butter. So it is your choice. You can melt butter, the same amount, or you can use Crisco, which is a vegetable shortening. Like I said, our families always use Crisco, but you can substitute the Crisco with butter if you're used to that butter taste in your baklava rather than the Crisco taste in your baklava. So those are our ingredients. Let's get started. We're going to start off with the atyr. The atyr is the sugar syrup that goes on top of the baklava immediately as it comes out of the oven. So again, we're going to need 4 cups of sugar. So in a pot or a saucepan, you'll add 4 cups of sugar, 2 cups of water, and you can add it directly in. And then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of the rose water. You are also going to need 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, but the lemon juice is not going to go in until after the rose water. And this we'll put on the stove on a medium heat, bring to boil, and then turn the stove down and let it boil for roughly around 10 to 15 minutes. So when your sugar water comes to a boil, you're going to turn your stove down to a simmer, do a little bit of a stir. And what's going to happen is your sugar water will eventually start to thicken, but you're going to let it simmer for about 5 minutes. And then in 5 minutes, we'll come back and we'll do the final touches. So it's been about 5 minutes with the sugar water on low heat. And if you can, you can tell the sugar water is a bit almost thickening up. And then as you let it go, you can see it right from the spoon. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. The lemon juice in the end thickens it up even more, because you want your sugar water to be a little bit thick when we pour it onto our baklava. And you'll turn the heat off. And one way of knowing how sticky or gooey it's become is as soon as your spoon cools off, you can actually touch your atyr or your sugar water and how sticky it is. So now what we do with our rose water is we will leave it and put aside for it to cool off while we're putting our pan of baklava together and putting that in the oven. Our atyr will be ready to go. We're going to start with our walnuts, and we're going to grind them until they are fine. So what I do is I put them in the food processor, a little at a time. And then I'll close it up. And that's what it's going to look like. Now you can go finer and you can go coarser. Again, it's preference. and how you like it or how you're used to it. Sometimes I like the baklava to have like a little small chunk of walnut that you're biting into, and other pieces are a little bit fine, which makes it kind of smooth. And then you can unpack it and then pulse it. And that's pretty much what's going to be. Now I'm doing 32 ounces of walnuts. We're going to put our walnut mixture together. So 32 ounces of walnuts that we grinded fairly fine. We're going to add a half a cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of rose water, and then I'm just going to mix it all together. The sugar, adding it with your walnut, is going to combine your walnut together. So when we add the walnut mixture in between our filo dough and our pan, it'll help keep the mixture together and also give it a good flavor where it'll melt in between. And then of course the rose water will give it that taste. Now rose water is an option. If you or anybody in your family doesn't care for the rose water, this can be done without. You have orange water, or if you want to put like a drop of vanilla or something of some sort, you can do that. We've always done it with the rose water, and I believe the traditional way is with the rose water. So that's been blended, and what we'll do now is put this aside and start with our filo dough. So I've added 2 cups of Crisco in a saucepan and onto the stove and letting it melt, and it should melt completely. Now, save time, you can throw it in the microwave and melt it that way. I've always been used to doing it on top stove. This is where you would do your butter instead. 2 cups of butter in place of the Crisco if you didn't want to use Crisco. And then you just watch it until it's completely melted. Okay, so we're going to start putting our baklava together. Now, normally I would have the filo dough on the other side and the pan in front of me with my melted butter or Crisco next to me. But I want you guys to see the actual pan and how it gets put together. So pull out my filo, and it's usually rolled. Not usually this tight. So here we go. And I want the filo to be completely rolled out and next to the pan, because what we're going to do is we're just going to remove from here and put here. But how we start off first is we'll paint the pan, give it a nice little coating of Crisco. And be careful if you've just taken the Crisco off the stove. It is hot, just so that you are aware and it doesn't burn you. It doesn't matter that if it's hot for the actual filo dough, just for your protection. And you take off 1 sheet, and you lay it onto your pan. Now I have this size pan and it works for me. You can use any size. If you have a smaller pan, you can cut your filo right in half and do small. So you put a sheet and you'll paint some melted butter or Crisco, and you'll pull another sheet and put it directly on top of your pan and the other sheet. Now, the first time doing this, I am not going to lie to you, it took me forever. Not really forever, but my Crisco or my butter started to harden back up. So if that happens, and it's going to happen if you've not tried this before, but trust me, stay at it. It does get easier. and it does work. Call a friend over, have him or her bring a pan with them, and do it together. Makes the time go by fast. But like I said, you can go ahead and remelt your butter and go sheet by sheet. And also, let you know, if you make a mistake or one rips or one sticks, it is not going to show when your baklava is done and all cut up. So you can go this way or you can go that way and slide it right over. And you're just going to paint it and give it a butter. Now, don't do too much butter, so that way it's drenched. It could weigh down your dough. But then again, don't be afraid to give it butter if you like that richness flavor in your baklava. I do just enough to kind of coat my sheet, so that way the sheets can go on and stay without moving. And then we'll continue this for the one pack. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, sometimes they rip, not a big deal. Put them in your pieces, just patch it up. And then all you need to do is once you put your butter or your Crisco, the melted, it'll keep it in place. And if you can't brush, just do it this way. So that way you keep your pieces together. So we kept repeating our job sheet by sheet. Now, just so that you know, filo dough does dry up quick. And in the beginning, when I first started doing this, I just had a kitchen towel and I tried to keep my filo dough covered as I was going through, and then just kind of uncovering, doing piece by piece, covering it back up as I was putting a layer to butter. And that way it didn't dry it out. But do trust me, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And your family and friends will just love you. So last piece, I add it. And get this out of the way. And I will brush it, give it a nice little coat, because it's the last piece for this one pack, or the first pack of our filo dough. And then I'll take my walnut and I'll put them in my pan. Now I use 32 ounces. If you find this being way too much walnut for you, then cut it down, do half. Whatever works for you. It's not a requirement that you have to have exactly 32 ounces. If you don't do exactly 32 ounces, just lessen the amount of sugar that you put in and the amount of rose water that you're going to put in to get your walnut mixture together. So once I put that, I kind of evenly spread it around. Spread it out, make sure it's kind of even, or as even as it could be. Used to have baklava parties at my house where everyone would bring a pan and a brush, and I made sure to have all the ingredients, and everyone made their pan. They made it as part of their cookie exchange, or they made it to as a gift. Once it's evenly spread, just pat it with my hands a little bit, just to kind of bring it down and together. And before I add my other layer, I will take some of the melted and kind of just like drizzle this way, so that when I put my first layer, it'll have something to catch up on and stick to. And then we're ready to top it. And then we'll just grab a layer. Now the first layer that goes onto your walnut, you just want to press it down a little bit. Just to kind of hold into place. And then just kind of dab your melted butter or Crisco on this, because your first layer is a little bit difficult. You want to make sure it stays on top. And don't worry about your edges here that you have a little bit of extra walnut. Again, it just depends on the size of pan that you have. This is the baking sheet that I pretty much use for everything. And what I normally do is I'll grab a sheet for the top layer, that is. And then I'll bring it over to end of here. Now this sheet's a little unforgiving, but that's okay. Like I said, it's phyllo dough, and the nice thing is it doesn't show your mishaps. So I brought that sheet over to the far edge as I could. And then my next sheet, I'll bring it over to the far edge of this side. And that way it covers your little walnut edges. And I'll keep repeating this all the way until this pack is done. And in between every sheet, the melted butter or Crisco oil. Crisco, that is. And we'll just continue with this. Okay, so I have 2 layers left. And then repeat it. Paint it up with some deliciousness. Some melted Crisco or butter. For all you vegetarians, I think Crisco being a vegetable shortening, it's a great dish out here for you, or a great pastry. My last sheet, not quite perfect, but not a big deal. Give it one last good painting. Now I have a ruler that I use to cut it. And the reason I use a ruler is because I stink at going straight. And also you want to try to evenly cut it. Now you can do it any size that you want. And also you can prepare it and not bake it right away, but you do want to bake it the same day. So it's prepared. Your oven temperature is usually at 425, and it's about 45 minutes to an hour. Now, any way you want it, you can go straight down the middle, go all the way across, straight down this section, go all the way across to give your size little squares. So I usually go wherever the middle is, put my ruler down, and go with my knife all the way through. And yes, you do cut this before you bake it, because once it's baked, your phyllo dough will be cooked and flaky, and you won't be able to cut it then. You go straight down. Now they're obviously going to be too big, so I'm going to cut these again in half, or each section. And I found that the easiest is go by section to cut. And again, if it's not straight, don't fret over it. It is not that big of a deal. And if you use a sharp knife, you want to go all the way down and over. Go like, just slide it right over And this doesn't matter because, like I said, once it's cooked, your filo is just going to be flaky. Okay, so I guess we had to cut for a little bit. I have a dog who loves Lebanese food just as much as we do and likes to, for those that caught glimpses of him, likes to come and pick up whatever I've dropped. So I guess that's a good thing. So then I turned my pan around to start on the other way. And a sharp knife, just go all the way through. And you try to go all the way through so that way it's completely cut and you don't have to worry about the pieces not being cut. So then I went down half the long way, and then this section I'm going to do it in threes. Of course, my ruler is not long enough, so I'll just bring it down. And I like to use the edge of a ruler. One time I couldn't find my ruler, so I just grabbed the edge of a cereal box and cut it down, made sure it was wiped, and used that. Your dough is going to stick to your ruler or whatever you use because of the melted Crisco or butter. Okay, so finishing up my little triangles. Once you've sliced or cut it all up, you don't need to do anything else to it other than pop it in the oven. So you've had your oven preheating at 425. We're going to put it on the bottom shelf for 35 minutes. In the center of the rack. And then we'll move it to the top shelf after 35 minutes. So 30 minutes have gone by, and this is pretty much really you want to look at it, or you want it to look like when the 30 minutes is out. See how flaky it is? But what I'm going to do, and at the 30-minute mark, you really do want to check your oven to make sure it's getting to that golden brown. But I'm going to put it on the top shelf for a couple more minutes, just to kind of golden brown it a little bit more, and then put our sugar syrup in. So we'll move it to the top shelf for 2 more minutes. Okay, so my couple minutes is up, and I'm going to grab it from my oven, bring it to my counter, and that's pretty much what you want it to look like. And immediately out of the oven is where you're going to put your sugar syrup on. And get ready for this sound because it is the most amazing sound ever. Now what I do is I'll start on one end and then just pour. I'll grab my ladle, fill it up, and go row by row first. Can you hear that sizzle? And then I'll just go the opposite way. Now this, you can put all of it, or you can put little of it, of the sugar syrup. But I pretty much, the majority of it I use. And if there's some left over, it's used with so many other sweets that you can just put it in a jar and you're fine. So I pretty much used all of my sugar syrup. on this pan and just evenly put it on all the rows, getting in the inside. Now, just so that you know, some of the ovens, depending on whether you have a gas oven or an electric oven, 425 is the temperature. You do 30 to 35 minutes on the lower level, 5 minutes on the top level, but you do after the 25 to 30 minute mark, depending on your temperature or your oven, you do want to check it because you want that prettiness and that golden brown look, but you also don't want to take a chance of burning it. Some ovens heat faster, some ovens take a long time. So now what we'll do is we'll let it rest for about 10 or 15 minutes or until it cools down, and then we'll platter it. So I take a knife and I just make sure that it did cut through, because even though when you're cutting it, sometimes you think it did, but it didn't. So I just want to make sure that it's cut, and I just really just do my knife through the parts that were pre-cut, especially my triangles. And then I take a little spatula. Now I have little cups. You can use them. You don't have to use them. I like them. It just makes it a little bit pretty. And I just pull a piece out and platter it. My cutting didn't go all the way through, so I just want to make sure before I pull it out it will fall apart. And the ones that fall apart, just eat them up. They are delicious. Like that one, that will be later. I will have that. So put it. And then just so that you see, and here you have it. Now, the longer you let it rest after it's been baked and you've put your sugar syrup on, the better it is to platter. You definitely want it to come back to room temperature or even cooler. You can store it anywhere you need to that's in a cool place. And there you go. You have baklava, sahtan, and I hope you've enjoyed this or will enjoy this as much as I've enjoyed putting it together for you.